Your goal is to help the business get to a yes or understand why it is a no. And you can't do that if you don't understand how HR works. Hi, my name is Kim Blue. I'm an HR executive and a member of the Black in HR Advisory Board.
Hi, Kim. Thank you so much for joining us again on our podcast. Can we start by talking about some of your HR roles and some of the companies you have worked for?
Yes. So I actually started my HR career at ESPN as an HR business partner, and that was my introduction into HR and all of the different functions that it hosts. And I spent 7 years as a business partner there before transitioning out of ESPN and moving from the media industry into technology. My next role was with Microsoft, and I spent 2 years there supporting their artificial intelligence and cloud business, and did most of my growing and learning in preparation to become an HR executive there. Right on the heels of the pandemic, I got an opportunity to transition out of Microsoft and step into a role for Zoom leading their HR business partner team. So I went from being an individual contributor to now being the strategic leader for that company, who oversaw all of the business partners, but then also was the key functional partner to all of the leaders of the HR team. And that role absolutely prepared me for my role as a CHRO with Open Exchange, which is a fintech company based out of Boston. And there I sat at the helm. I had the entire HR organization under me, and I was responsible for the strategic direction of the company, while at the same time being an advisor to not only the CEO, but all of the functional leads for the organization. So I've had a very fortunate and storied career in HR.
Let's take it back to when you first started off early in your career. What do you wish you would have known early on?
So many things. I wish that I would have known it's okay to ask questions, because I did not ask enough questions. I was curious, but I was only curious enough to get the job done. My curiosity didn't extend beyond the how and the why behind that. It was more executionary. I also wish that I had known that it is okay for you to not know and say that you don't know. In the beginning of my career, I actually thought I needed to know all of the answers, and I was not brave enough to speak up and advocate for myself. That led to me making mistakes early in my career, and granted, I learned from them, but the learning could have been curved, or I could have been in a better position to advance or just grow professionally had I been more brave and been able to speak up and advocate for myself. So I wish that I would have known it was okay to do that. I also wish that I would have known that it was okay to show up as myself. Very early in my career, I spent time being extremely corporate. I thought I had to have all the buzzwords and know all of the language and really talk big talk, when at the end of the day, people just want you to have a conversation with them. You don't have to be so HR all the time. The reason that I am in human resources is because I like people and I believe in people. And so being a human first was one of the things that I learned. And I wish that I would have done that earlier in my career. Somebody would have said, hey, right, scrap all that other stuff. All they need to do is experience Kim Blue. And I think that I probably would have had a smoother and more confident entry into the role, but I learned by doing. And I think that that has been probably what has been a foundational learning that I go back to even now at this stage in my career.
With having numerous years of experience, can you tell us and describe to us what you think good company culture is?
Yes, I think good company culture is comprised of three things. One is being in alignment with your values. What does our company stand for? What do we want people to know about us and about the way that we treat our employees and the way that we value our products? So that's first. The second thing is, I think good company culture comes from really allowing inclusivity to be present. So it's not one person's vision. It's not one person's idea. It's the opportunity for everybody to bring their ideas, their perspectives, their questions, their challenges into the conversation and making that a part of how the company moves forward. And the third thing that I think makes good company culture is honesty and transparency. You have to be open about sharing all of the things that are going really well just as much as you want to share the things that are not going so well. Because when people feel connected to the story, when people know where their place is in the organization, then they know that they belong. Then they feel that their value is high and that they can stay there because they not only trust the leadership, but they trust that their place in the organization is going to continue to have longevity. And so I think all of those things go into making good company culture.
When was the moment you knew it was time for transition?
Oh my goodness. So I would probably say the pivotal moment I knew it was time for transition for me was when I got to a place where I felt like I had done everything that I could do in my role at the company at that time. So I started my career at ESPN, and I had been fortunate. I grew up there. I spent 7 years as a business partner, and I had learned so much. I met so many people. I had experienced numerous HR transformation, whether it was new leaders coming into the organization or opportunities to support different client groups in different geographical regions. I mean, you name it, I did it. But when I really knew that it was time for me to make a transition was when I came back around to supporting the very first client group that I ever supported at ESPN. And I remember feeling angst about going back to this place and saying, are they going to receive me? Are they going to be okay knowing that Kim Blue is different? I am not that young, right, fresh-eyed HR business partner that is coming into the organization. I am seasoned. I am experienced. I am knowledgeable, and I am more credible than I was 7 years ago when I stepped into this role. And say, are they going to meet me there? And are they going to allow me to have that influence in the organization? Now, the answer to that question was yes. But for me, that was very telling, right? Coming all full circle back in my career and realizing this is probably the time that I need to begin to think about transitioning to whatever my next or my greater was. And so that was very pivotal for me as I reflected on my career and where I wanted to go next.
On this HR subject, I think it's time for us to get a little transparent. What do you think your biggest failure was? And what did you learn from that experience?
So my biggest failure, honestly, was not following my gut. So early in my career, it was one of the things that I struggled with. And even as I grew and climbed the ladder as an HR executive, I actually had an opportunity to not step into my CHRO role because I thought that it was actually better suited for a consultant. And I ended up accepting the role anyway, and through a series of just business transitions, ended up exiting the role 10 months later. And when I reflect on that now, what I took away from that is, while I may have thought that my gut was right, and it was actually a blessing in disguise because it turned out that I used that experience to prepare me for my now career, which is entrepreneur and owning my own consulting business. So while I didn't follow my gut and push back against that and start my business earlier, it ended up being the right decision. And so what felt like failure absolutely ended up becoming a phoenix moment, and I was able to rise away from that. And it has made me a much better consultant and more confident in my ability to stick to my gut and use my voice as my greatest currency, but also operate in my business.
One of the challenges that I think many people face is knowing how to properly update leadership on their accomplishments and also their mistakes, or even understanding how to ensure that their leader is aware of the challenges that they are facing. As a leader, how do you deal with managing up your leadership, and what are some examples where that has been effective?
So it is so important that you learn to manage your manager, because if you don't, there are opportunities that get missed Managers are busy, leaders are busy, and we are focused on things that may not be directed at your day-to-day, even though we are responsible for people. So you have to be the boss of your own blueprint. You have to be intentional about setting the meetings, framing the conversations, owning the agendas, and making sure that you're communicating when and how you need to share the accomplishments that you have. The other thing that I would strongly recommend is to get stakeholder feedback. What do I mean by stakeholder? I mean, who are the people that you work alongside, or who are the people that you cross-collaborate with, to say, would you mind just sending a quick note talking about how our partnership went, in particular if it was a positive experience, were you able to have really good impact? There's nothing wrong with saying, could you just send a recap note to my leader? I think it would go a long way to make sure that they hear from someone other than me about how this experience went. So being able to ask for that, or if they're not comfortable with that, having them send it to you and then you sharing it with your leader to be able to do that. I also believe that you should have a regular check-in with yourself, whether it is monthly, whether it is quarterly, and document all of the accomplishments that you have had, whether that is through a list, whether it's through a Google Doc, whether you are taking time on a Friday afternoon to say, I just need to go back through my calendar, look back at my meetings. Who did I have conversations with? What are the outcomes or the artifacts that are actually going to prove that things have changed and that I can demonstrate notable impact on what this is? So as you're documenting and as you're setting yourself up for success, those are all the things that you can then have so that nothing catches you off guard in a performance conversation, and that you're ready to openly talk to your leader and be prepared for feedback, whether it's feedback that is positive or whether it's feedback that is critical, because you know you best. So you may know, right, I didn't show up the greatest in that conversation, or I dropped the ball here and this is an opportunity for me to improve. Now you can proactively go in and the feedback feels like it doesn't blindside you, and you can be prepared to course correct or redirect whatever it is that you need. So I think investing in the documentation, being intentional about owning the conversations or the meetings, and being really, really clear about saying or asking for whatever you need from someone else to help tell your story are ways that you can ensure that anything you want your leader or manager to know about your performance is always going to be present.
Kim, I love how you always bring it back to yourself and you make sure your mental health is great. You're making sure that my self-care is also being included. When do you think it's time to speak up when there's an issue at work?
I think it is time to speak up immediately. And there's different levels to speaking up. Sometimes speaking up can be something as simple as asking a question for clarity. Hey, I wasn't aware that this was our practice, or hey, I didn't know that this change had been made. Could I get some clarity around when and why that is? Sometimes speaking up could be a result of seeing a perpetual pattern that is showing up, or a behavior change in something, in particular if it is impacting your ability to do your work, or if it is impacting your ability to respond positively to people or situations that are taking place. The moment you are unable to perform, or you feel like you're in an environment that's not going to allow you to operate at your best, you have to speak up and advocate for yourself. The other time that you should absolutely speak up is when things that are going on around you have a direct impact to your ability to do your job. If your environment is not settled, or if there are things taking place around you that hinder you from operating at your highest potential, you should absolutely speak up and ensure that you have what you need to perform at your best, and that you are not in any way disturbed or deterred from being able to do that. Additionally, if there are things that are happening in the organization, period, that are hindering more than just you or your team to be able to function cohesively, then you should speak up and advocate for whatever changes are needed. Remember, you're a team. Your brand, the work that you produce, is representative of the entire company's brand. So if you are operating in deficit and you're not asking for what you need, you're then hindering the progress and the success of the entire organization. So don't be afraid to speak up, even if it feels uncomfortable. That discomfort in the long run could be the thing that could be leading you to challenges that could have been avoided if you took the time and the opportunity to speak up.
How can we demand importance from the C-suite for approval of projects that will improve a company? How can we hold ourselves accountable?
So accountability is so key in all of our situations as HR leaders, but also as individual contributors. And listen, the C-suite, they are there to align the strategic direction of the company, right? They're not touching a lot of the day-to-day. They are responsible for knowing if we want to reach the goals and bottom lines, then here is how we need to do that. And then they go back to their respective teams and start to push down the goals and the priorities to make sure that that's taking place. It is in those conversations with their leaders and their teams that they are charging or challenging their leaders to say, if you're hearing things, if there are things that you are seeing or experiencing that are hindering you or that are disrupting the progress, I want you to feed that back up to me because I have got an accountability to our team for the success to make sure that everybody is hearing and understanding what those challenges are. So you have to empower from the top, right? We talk about the tone at the top being something that is set and intentioned, but you also have to empower down. Just like you have to manage up, that empowerment has to come from the top. So if you're not empowering your teams that are beneath you to speak up, to elevate challenges, to elevate successes, then you are not equipping your C-suite to be successful in what their roles are. So manage up, empower down. And I think that's the best way to hold the C-suite accountable for being able to get process improvement in place, to be able to get approvals for any type of changes or redirection of workflows, whether that's the addition of resources, any type of knowledge, or to be able to pause and say, what we're working on right now, is that in alignment with our values or even in the strategic direction of the company? So empower down and manage up.
You often talk about in your role with Open Exchange, how you orchestrate your own exit through a reduction in workforce.
Yes.
Can you walk us through that process and decision?
Absolutely. So it was not an easy decision. And it is never easy for you to know a direction that you need to go in that actually doesn't end in a favorable outcome. And I knew this was not going to end in a favorable outcome. And so the first conversation was with myself. What can I do and what's most important to the organization? I knew that Open Exchange needed a really solid HR team, and I also knew that they could do that absent a leader if I put the practices and processes and systems in place for them to be successful. So I empowered down and I managed up. I actually raised my hand to the CEO and said, I see the direction that we're going in, and I believe that in leading us through this direction, I can also set this team up to continue to succeed and provide support in the absence of the company having this role. And so I proposed that we work towards that. And after some consideration, the CEO was amenable to that, right? But essentially, I had just said, I'm going to lay myself off, right? I'm going to give up my job. And I did. Not only did I give up my job, but I took a salary reduction early on to be able to support saving some of my team so that they could remain through some of the reductions in force. Again, that was a personal choice, but as a leader, my values are really aligned to supporting the organization. And I wanted to put every measure in place possible to make sure that the infrastructure could stay the same, because at the end of any day, people are the most valuable resource that a company has. And along that journey, I made sure that the team had processes, frameworks, they had access to resources, they had points of contact that were going to be able to support them. And when it came time to redirect the leadership to a different department so that I could exit, they had everything that they needed to be able to continue to function absent of having a formal chief people officer. It was the most uncomfortable decision I had ever made, and it was the best decision that I ever made because I knew it was right for the organization, and it turned out to be the best decision for myself because that's then what spearheaded me into my own consulting practice. So, right, I tell people all the time, you've never lived until you've laid yourself off, but it was such a phenomenal learning experience, and if I had to do it all over again, I would do the same thing.
It is time for Ask HR, where we get member questions, of course, on HR. And you just tell us a little bit of how you would handle the situation. So the member question is, Kim, I know that you basically wrote the book on being an HR business partner. How does someone move from being a recruiter to an HR business partner role? Are there any skills that are transferable to TA, which is talent acquisitions, that translate easily to a business partner role?
Yes. So there are always opportunities to move from a role in talent acquisition into an HR business partner. What comes to mind immediately are the ability to build relationships. You have to be able to connect with people, understand and assess what skills that they bring to a role and why they would be a culture add and not just a culture fit to a team and to the organization. The second one is the ability to have really strong business acumen. As a member of the talent acquisition team, you absolutely have to know what this business does or what part of the organization that you're hiring for is responsible to contributing to the company, because you're essentially the first point of contact, right? You are selling the opportunity for someone to come and bring their expertise to this organization. And if you don't know the business, if you've not been a student of the business, then you're not going to be able to do that. And that is what HR business partners do. They sit at the intersection of HR and of the client. So they have to know enough about the business and the client groups that they're supporting to be able to translate that back to our HR partners and say, hey, this is the direction the business wants to go in. Now, as the HR business partner, it's my recommendation that we bring in these different functional areas to help advance whatever the business strategy is. So you absolutely have to be a student of the business. And then lastly, every single person who is in talent acquisition, who is considering moving into being an HR business partner, has to be open to understanding just the overall HR strategy, right? What is the HR life cycle and how is moving into an HR business partner role going to expose me to that? So you need to know what the other functions of HR do. Just because you're a recruiter doesn't mean that you don't need to understand what the compensation team does or what the diversity and inclusion team does or what the HR business partner team does. You need to know about the other functions of HR, because as a business partner, your job is going to be able to make recommendations and to make referrals to say, this is the place and here are the people, or this is the reason why we now need to bring in these other functional experts, these folks who are subject matter experts in their expertise to help you get to whatever it is that you are aspiring to. As an HR business partner, my philosophy is this. Your goal is to help the business get to a yes or understand why it is a no. And you can't do that if you don't understand how HR works. So understanding the business, being able to build relationships, and understanding all of the functions of HR are the things that come to mind if you were thinking about moving from talent acquisition into a business partner role.
Before you leave, can you tell us why someone should join Black in HR and who is Black in HR for?
Absolutely. So why should you join Black in HR? Black in HR is a wealth of knowledge, resources, and capabilities at your fingertips. If you are an HR professional, this is the place that you want to be, because you will have exposure to every single HR professional that works in a function of HR. So if you are thinking about transitioning to a different department, if you are comfortable in your function and you just want to be able to network and connect with other people so that you can grow and advance in your career, if you know nothing about HR and you're thinking about starting your career and you want to know what's out there for me, how do I know if HR is for me, or what is going on in the HR space that I think I can be really great at? This is the place for you. This is where we share knowledge. This is where we bring education to the forefront and we challenge you to truly own your career. You get exposure to coaches. You get access to all of the services that you would provide someone who is not in HR. Black in HR provides that to you. In addition, there are masterclasses. There are opportunities to grow your capabilities. And most importantly, the ability to just see and have access to those who are impacting the HR industry and really bringing their expertise there. So Black in HR is for you. It is for everyone. You actually don't have to be an HR professional. You can be a professional who wants to understand why HR is valuable to you, why you should build relationships with your HR team, partner, or leader. And this is the space where you're going to be able to do that. Partnership is key. Engagement is key. Owning your career is key. And Black in HR is going to be able to expose you to all of those things and so much more. So if you are not joining Black in HR, what are you doing? Why are you waiting? Opportunity is now.
It is always a pleasure Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.